Welcome back, everybody, to Vaults Remastered. This is the fourth episode in my series of who knows how many videos just recording my ideas, my thoughts, my journey, my tale of discovery, of making a crazy journey from 5th edition D&D, taking a homebrew campaign that's been running for about 5 years now with multiple players, 3 different teams, going crazy, and wholesale turning it into a Pathfinder 2nd edition remastered game. So I decided, while I'm sitting here enjoying a nice frothy mug of player tears, that I would record a video about the start of your journey. If you go back to the videos I've talked about so far or have made so far, I had discussion of taking your 5e game, your world, and destroying it, wiping it clean, starting fresh. And video 2 is about recasting it as this Pathfinder game, coming up with a theme, coming up with an idea for your new game. Not completely starting brand spanking new with nothing to do with the previous game, but using your old game and just recasting it. And then the third video, I got into establishing some plots, the story, like what's going on in this new world. And so today, the fourth one, you're starting. But of course, starting is probably maybe the hardest part, because where do you start? And it really depends on the scope of your game. If you have seen my other videos, you know the game that I'm discussing for the vaults, my homebrew campaign world. I have this concept of a grand fight between the forces of chaos and the forces of order. And the stakes of the world are the ultimate annihilation, destruction of this world if things go horribly wrong. And I've got this idea for multiple plot threads interweaving with one another, creating this grand tapestry of chaos. Now, that's my game, that's my world, but it creates problems, right? And I'm sure if you're in the same, anywhere near the same situation as I am, trying to restart your game or start a new game in Pathfinder, you're in a similar boat. Like, where do you start? Whether you have one plot or 8 plots, like I potentially have. That's the big money question. So let's get into it. Let's see if we can figure out some answers to this question. Ah, all right. What do we got? So hey, how do you start this new campaign? Well, I've got 3 things that I would suggest would be out of the gate. Uh, Trying to get this thing started, right? I need to know what the competition is, not my competition, YouTube or other, you know, GMs in the neighborhood. No, I'm talking about within the game world. What is the fight? What's the conflict? Who are the drivers? Who are these forces that are pounding into each other? What do they want? What are their motivations? We've talked about this a couple times already in some of the earlier videos. You need to define that. Okay, who are the players, not the PCs, but the movers and shakers of the game world, because that's going to help you figure out where you should start. Define the victory and defeat conditions. What does a win look like? What does a loss look like? And you know, and it's going to be different for whichever side of the fight you're on. We need to know what that looks like and what those are before we can get started. And lastly, what's your venue? Where is the competition? Where is the fight happening? Where are people going to find the things they're looking for? Where are they layering? Where are they headquartered? Where do they live? You know, what is the locations that are relevant? And your start, whatever you choose, you know, whenever it occurs, should be part of this competition, should be part of this struggle. It should be scoring a point for the competition, probably. I don't necessarily know it should score a point for the good guys, because it's usually, in my opinion, better for the bad guys to get a point early, because that's going to then drive your characters, your players forward to even it up. And it should definitely happen in a place that is important to the venue, to the competition. So it's got to be somewhere on the map. So those are the things that if you can determine early and define early, makes your ability to come up with a start much easier. Now, of course, most people traditionally would do something like this. I'm not saying you all or me or whatever, but just most people are like, I start my game in a tavern, right? We've seen it 1,000 times. We've heard it a million times before, right? You start in a tavern, you sit around and they chit chat, right? But do you have to start in a tavern? Do you need to have that? That's introduce your character, tell us what you're wearing, what you look like. Do you have to do it that way? Of course not, right? So here's your big chance to break some molds and do whatever you want to do. So where does the campaign start for you? Some suggestions I have is go back and look at your theme again. I've got this theme of chaos versus order. I got a theme of survival, of freedom versus tyranny. So I definitely want to be able to use those elements in the start of my game. And so maybe sitting around in a nice cozy tavern doesn't make any sense because there are no taverns. You're clawing for bugs and vermin in order to eat because you're starving. That might be your start for me. Crawling through the dirt and stirring rats and cockroaches out of holes in the ground. I don't know. Also, consider your current events. What's currently happening in your game world? For me, and if you've been following along, I've destroyed my game world. I had apocalyptic events. I had cataclysms breaking loose. I had 4 things going down. And the way I'm looking at this, I'm probably starting my new campaign, this 2E game, about 6 months, let's say, post these apocalyptic events. So current events are going to be the aftermath of those events as new powers rise and old powers sink, and the chaos that has ensued since these dramatic events have unfolded. So that's definitely important. That would be first and foremost on a lot of people's minds and will help me figure out where my tavern should be. Also, look at your history of your game and of your world. So my history, as I just mentioned, was a few months earlier. This cataclysm happened, but before that, historically speaking, this place was a location of relative safety. There were refugee camps located in a set of ruins that were secretly existing beneath this tyrannical city known as Pedestal that had been taken over by the Black Earth cult, dominated by the Black Hammer, the Durgar. Now your game world's obviously going to be different, so that history is going to be different. But for me, that was something that definitely will help me decide the start and where I should start, because I know what's happened before and what's currently happening. The other big consideration as far as where you should be starting, and when, of course, is the scope of your game. I mean, are we talking it's just a small town, a small village, one of these camps I'm referring to? Well, then that means you're going to be starting within that smaller realm. If you're going big, worldwide, broad scope, that's also going to give you more options of where you can start. And also go along with that is your timeline. Is this something that's immediate, has to happen right away? This is like a single night's adventure or something, both literally and maybe figuratively? Or is this a decades spanning adventure you've got a level 1 to 20 cosmological expansive thing that's going on that can help you determine where to start as well, because again maybe you're really defined by time and space, and so you have to start in the tavern because that's where the adventure is. But you could, if you have this big expansive cosmos thing, maybe you're starting on the moon. I don't know. But there's plenty of things that you can come up with besides the tavern. So kind of give you an example of that, and I'm going to use my game world, the vaults a little bit, is alternatives to the tavern. So I'm going to go ahead and consult with my muse, who for me is named Kathy, and this is for Chatty Kathy or ChatGPT. If you've watched a couple of my other videos, you've seen me use it a couple times. I'm going to use it again here because maybe you're like me, you're not really 100% sure where you're going to start yet. So let me go ahead and pause the vid for a second. Let me get it set up, and then we'll see if we can get some real-time feedback, suggestions from Kathy as to where to start your campaign. All right, here is ChatGPT, and what I'm going to use is a plot suggestion that she and I came up with in my last video where we're talking about plotting your course. And if you haven't seen that one, I'll give you the quick, dirty version of what I talked about with Kathy. I pitched to her my 8 plot lines, my potential plot threads that are running through my chaos versus order big picture world, the vaults. And I asked her if she could come up with some ways to kind of refine these plots to give some motivations and that sort of thing, stakes for the movers and shakers, the players, right? And part of that was, hey, could you perhaps come up with a way to intertwine some of these 8 into pairs so that instead of 8, I've got 4. Then this makes prep a little bit easier, makes my options less, yet the scope is still as grand as I'm looking for. And so one of the options that she came up with, and I want to use for this example here, is that the Arcano intelligence in my game world, known as Nexus, who is in the process of assimilating a bunch of life forms to create a drone army that will help it regain the rest of its intelligence partitions, shall we say, to use a computer reference. It's is infecting people with nanites and turning them into drones and such. And then while that's going on, there is another event that's also happened nearby. A party from the previous 5e game had activated the chaos engine, the Zeus drive of an ancient derelict alien ship that was buried beneath and part of the lower levels of a mega dungeon within my game world known as Ivaforth Hall. And this engine had been activated and released this huge bubble of chaos energy that had been temporarily halted by the sacrifice of a powerful sorceress NPC that had worked with the party in various times and locations. Old campaign stuff. Well, Chatty, Kathy, she suggested intertwining these two events. And so she had proposed the following: that Nexus might be drawn to the Chaos Bubble and see it as a power source to become even more powerful and gain more abilities. And that the alien ship where the Chaos Bubble was originating from might have some technology that could actually counteract Nexus's nanites. And so the players are venturing into the Chaos Bubble, perhaps to try to find whatever it is to fight Nexus, and try to harness the ship's abilities, power somehow to take her down, to stop her assimilation, Borg threat. So I had then asked Kathy if she could suggest how these players, whoever they are, not the PCs, but again the antagonists, the NPCs, factions might be involved. I'm loosely calling them agents of chaos, agents of order, the opposing big picture forces. So could she suggest how they would be involved in this intertwined plot? What are their motivations? What might be at stake for them? And then give me some ideas for NPCs that would be involved in the group names. And so she proposed 2 amazing things, and this is why I want to use them. So my last video, I ended kind of talking about this, and I was very impressed. She suggested one group, the Agents of Chaos, was going to be named the Harbingers of the Abyss. They had a leader named Mordrek. They had a couple other key members, Slithra and Groim. And they were all for this chaos bubble continuing to expand, and they wanted it to essentially burst or reach Nexus, and this fusion of the chaos with Nexus, the AI system, would create this new reality, this the embracing the chaos, the void. They wanted to see this new world of unpredictable, limitless power. And they thought that if they were followers of the chaos, they would reign supreme, and that if they were to fail in their mission, they would remain confined to the stifling limitations of this horrible current universe. So these guys, I guess, could be bad guys, but my definition of chaos and order is not good or evil here. It could be either one. The way this is presented by Kathy here, they seem to be kind of on a nasty track. Now, she went ahead and proposed the Agents of Order, known as the Bastion of Celestial Equilibrium. Leader was Seraphel. members Lyria and Calum, I believe that is. And so, what the Bastion's goal was to stop the spread of the chaos bubble, to stop Nexus's assimilation of people. They had been watching, and they are guardians, guardians of the universe apparently. So they are trying to fight to preserve the equilibrium of the universe, and they want to make sure that the universe remains stable and predictable. And so they don't want this bubble and Nexus to continue to interact. So they are going to fight against that chaotic force. And if they fail, then they fear that the very fabric of reality is going to collapse. And so then Kathy went on to pitch how they're both going to fit into the big plot. The Harbingers of the Abyss, they learn the chaos bubble and the potential of Nexus to exploit it, and they actively are trying to stop players from stopping the bubble spread. They want the bubble to spread. They want it to blow up. And the Bastion, on the other hand, is trying to stop Nexus and trying to figure out a way to shut down her nanites, or its nanites, and they're like this beacon of hope in this world. So this is where Kathy left off. I want to use this as my starting point here as to how could I start such a campaign, such a plot, if this was the one. And this is going to be one of the 8 or one of the 4 I think I want to use. I like this that much. So let's take a look at what we're trying to do again, and then we're going to go ahead and use Kathy here to propose some options, some ideas for us. So the question we're going to be looking to get some help with Kathy on is the alternatives to the tavern. Where else could we start, specifically in my particular game setting? So, you have your world and you're thinking about where you could start. Similar process. There's alternatives. So let's see what are some ideas that she might have for this plot and that question. So give me a second, and I'm going to go ahead and type that in there and then get ready to send it, and then you can see her live responses. Okay, here we go. So there's what I've typed in for her to consider. So I say, hey, I'm trying to design the first session for this new remastered campaign. I want to use the idea for the intertwined nexus infestation and expanding chaos bubble plots as the foundation for one of my team's games. However, I'm having some challenges determining how to start this campaign. I need some alternatives to the traditional you meet in a tavern. Can you provide me with a few ideas for alternate starting locations? I particularly could use some that are specific to my game world and theme: subterranean, post-apocalyptic, survival-based, etc. The refugee camp and its tavern from the original 5e game that has been destroyed are now the location of the Nexus. I'm going to do this. A couple challenges to consider are that just want to give her the context here for consideration. So let me rearrange this a little bit. So a couple challenges to consider are that the refugee camp and its tavern from the original 5e game that has been destroyed are now in the location of the Nexus. So many of the inhabitants have been assimilated by its nanites. And the Nebulon's chaos bubble has poisoned much of the ruins around Ivaforth Hall, and it is leaking mutative warp energy into the drinking water and food supply of the nearby settlements, such as refugee camps. So where else might my new characters meet in such a scenario if there is no tavern? Enter. Let's see what she suggests. All right, certainly, given the grim and treacherous environment of your subterranean post-apocalyptic world, here are some alternate starting locations: the Crystal Caverns, a collapsed tunnel, field hospital, healing shrine, subterranean transport hub, ancient library archive, the last standing marketplace, mutated garden, fungal forest. She's really going sick. Okay, so she gave me 7 other alternate starting locations. I haven't seen any of these. I don't know if they're any good or not. So you're seeing what I see in real time. The Crystal Caverns. Players might start in the magnificent yet ominous crystal caverns which have become a makeshift refuge for some survivors. The light emitted from the luminous crystals creates a safe haven from the darker threats of the vaults. A meeting here could happen while they're all independently exploring the caverns for resources or knowledge, trying to glean insights from the naturally magical formations about how to combat the emerging threats. Not a bad idea. You could have that be some obscure cavern somewhere, right? Some remote location. Interesting. So you meet in the Crystal Caverns. A collapsed tunnel. Players might be part of a team or coincidentally meet while trying to clear a collapsed tunnel that was once a vital route between safe zones. A sudden seismic activity traps them together, and they must cooperate to navigate through an alternative, more perilous path, perhaps even while being chased by a subterranean creature or running from the expanding chaos bubble. I like this one. This is pretty cool. This is like, bam, right in the action, right? Maybe the players are trying to clear some rubble. They were, part of some refugees or somebody trying to move, and there's a collapse, and they get secluded with each other, cut off, and they have to, dig through. Or maybe they have to find a detour, and then bang, they get chased. This is great. This could be a great little, level 1 thing. Interesting. Field Hospital, Healing Shrine. In the shadow of the vaults, amidst the chaos, a field hospital or healing shrine dedicated to a deity of healing or refuge and refuge has become a beacon for the wounded and weary, which is a little bit tough because there are no true deities anymore. There's some primordials. But okay, let's keep going. Here, the players might converge, seeking healing, offering help, or looking for loved ones. Okay, I kind of like that idea, looking for loved ones. Like it's, whenever you see disasters here on Earth and people are putting up the posters looking for their missing, maybe it's something like that. That'd be perfect for this post-cataclysmic event. There's survivors of the camps are looking for their loved ones that have gone missing. They've been assimilated, or they've the water too close to the chaos bubble or something. Who knows? Or there's stuff coming out of the bubble that's making people disappear. This is a cool idea. Anyway, they find themselves entwined in a quest as a new threat emerges, possibly Nexus's assimilated beings attacking the shrine, forcing them to band together for survival. I like that one. That's pretty cool. Another one kind of gets you going in the action right away. Subterranean Transport Hub. An old, intricate network of subterranean mine carts or magical transportation devices may connect various sections of the vaults. Players could start at a hub of each of such a system, meeting as they seek ways to reach disparate parts of the world, perhaps each possessing a piece of a cryptic puzzle or map unknowingly. Okay, maybe. Amidst the travel, the network starts malfunctioning due to the influence of the chaos bubble, forcing them into a collective adventure. All right, yeah, maybe there's some sort of I do have the concept of the lightning rails of like Eberron in existence, ancient like the dwarven technology that was in this game world before all this stuff went to crap. So maybe they found one of these things, or it's like a rebuilt one, and they're trying to get it to work again, and they maybe have a map that they're supposed to be following to find some place of safety if they could follow this old transport hub or whatever. Or maybe it's some mystical, elemental node that allows you to travel through Earth or something. And then boom, bubble poppage or something like that and throws you off course. Interesting. Ancient Library Archive. It's kind of like Ivyforth. In the depths of the vaults, an ancient, partially ruined library stands as one of the last vestiges of accumulated knowledge. Maybe they're in Ivyforth at the start of the game, inside the Chaos Bubble. That would be freaky because the Chaos Bubble swallowed a bunch of people who fell from the city of Pedestal above. So maybe that's who the players are. They're survivors of that initial, people falling as their buildings from the city collapsed, and they're stuck now in the Chaos Bubble itself. That would be wicked cool. And they don't know it. They have no idea that they're actually inside of this thing. Crazy. And like all they see around them is just like darkness. So they're like wondering what happened to the crystals, because the world is lit by like crystals, lum crystals I call them, and they shift through spectra of light in order to kind of tell time. But anyway, that's all gone dark, and all I see is blackness around them because they don't realize they're inside the bubble. Dude, that would be mind blowing. Characters might cross paths while seeking this knowledge, independently or upon hearing rumors of a safe passage, ancient weapon, or secret to defeat the looming threats. So yeah, maybe they're stuck in there and they're searching this ruins and they're trying to find something to defend themselves or escape, figure out what's happening. The last standing marketplace. A cavern once vibrant with traders now operates in the shadows, wary of the Nexus and the Chaos Bubble. I kind of, here's the problem is that Kathy's thinking the Chaos Bubble is some living thing, and it's not. It's just, boom, the explosion that's been halted mid detonation. This could be a melting pot of rogue traders, illicit dealers, desperate refugees. I mean, the idea is fine. Characters arriving for varied reasons, buying resources, seeking information, or trying to hire help, might be forced to unite as an unexpected catastrophe like a Nexus assimilation raid or a surge of the Chaos Bubble plunges the market into chaos. Rather than the Chaos Bubble surging, it would probably be belching out creatures or some mutants that are, inside of it. I like that idea better. Mutated garden fungal forest. A once lush underground garden, now mutated and dangerously vibrant due to the chaos bubble, draws the attention of researchers, alchemists, and scavengers. Characters might converge here, fascinated by bizarre and potent flora, only to find the place under threat by an emerging monstrous entity of the vaults, sparking an unplanned alliance. This is also really good, right? I mean, she knocked it out of the park, right? A couple of these are a little bit but I mean, at least 5 of these I'm like, oh yeah. And a couple of these I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. Whew, this is crazy. I mean, it's a great. And the other thing about it is, and let's say you use one of these as your start. The rest of these could easily be adventure plots. Nodes down the plot thread later. Very good. All right, I have a couple favorites. I'm really digging the idea of them actually being in the bubble already. That's pretty cool. Kind of creates this whole new threats, but or the collapsed tunnel, that one's just sort of simple, you know. See that being a thing. You're just sort of grunts trying to clear a tunnel and boom, all hell breaks loose. I like that idea. I mean, either of those could be easily start your campaign. All right, well, anyway, let's continue. So, again, I don't want to sit there and dwell on that one thing for the whole time, but you get the idea, right? You don't have to just meet in a tavern. Just with me consulting with Kathy there for a few minutes, I mean, she gave me 7 really good ideas. 5 or so are really, really, really good, and a couple I'm like, dang, I think I'm going to use them. Uh, None of them are meet in a tavern and describe your dress. Like, who cares? Hey, that's great for some campaigns, but in something like this kind of fits the theme, or I like that she was fitting the theme, that she was fitting the setting. It was very cool. Good work. All right, so hey, you come up with your starting point, whatever it is. Tavern, you want to meet in a tavern, go for it. But it's not the only place you can meet. Then the next thing, of course, you want to do is, if your typical scenes in a tavern, there's some sort of event happens, right? You're raising your tankard to your friend's health as part of this role play thing, and all of a sudden there's a sudden something happens, right? So, what is your method to then start? You have your location, but how? Like, what's your methodology? So, a couple things you want to consider here is, how many PCs are you dealing with? Is it a small group of players, 3 or 4, or do you got 5 or 6? That's going to help you figure out how involved you should get with whatever your starting point is and what you plan on doing. What level are they? Are they level 0, level 1? Really, weak. So that's going to change how you want to get them right into the game. Plus, considering that you're starting Pathfinder, if your players don't know the game too well, you don't want to really just hit them super hard with all kinds of stuff because they're trying to learn the rules as I am. So I think kind of easing that off a little bit and having it more like a starter set, starter box type of adventure is probably a smart play. The other thing that could be unique to my game, but just something to think about, if you're running more than one group, one team, you got to consider that how you plan on starting. Because if you're starting in the same exact location, but your world is continuous with itself, then if that location gets wrecked or destroyed or something happens in it, and then the next game, the next team plays a week later, you need to factor that in to your start. So maybe you have 2 different starting locations. And how frequently you're playing also could, impact how you want to start your game. If you're playing only once a month, you probably want to start hard, fast, and get going immediately, so that the players get a lot out of it. Whereas if you're playing every week, a few hours, you can probably maybe take things a little bit slower. The one thing to consider is that remember that your start, whatever it is going to put everything else in motion after it. So it has to be pretty solid, pretty strong, because everything else flows from it, right? Another thing to think about is that the end is going to justify the beginning. So what I mean there is that if you know where your campaign's going, like how you imagine it's ending, like is it going to be Frodo throwing the ring into the Mount Doom, right? If that's sort of the end you've got going, that's going to help you figure out how to start this whole campaign off, your beginning. So start to think about how are you ending, and then how should the game start in order to ultimately reach there? Is there some big old swooping character arc like with Frodo, where he starts off as just kind of this, doesn't really know what's going on, peaceful hobbit there in the Shire reading a book under a tree, and in the end he's the hero, getting his fingers bit off and ring of power going into Mount Doom, right? Saving the world type of thing. That transformative arc. The other thing to consider is that, as you're designing, whether this is a start session or whatever, your main job is to provide questions, not answers. That might sound a little bit, backward, but, your players are the ones that are trying to come up with the answers. So the starting session should definitely provide a lot of questions, a lot of mystery, a lot of things that need to be solved so that they are using their characters to get the answers and they want to keep going forward after your first session. So you don't want to just answer everything immediately and then there's nothing left to do. So with some of these things in mind, how do you do this? What method should you use? Well, there's the tried and true one, the getting to know you, right? The traditional one, sitting around and maybe your characters have relationships with each other. They know each other from some previous whatever, or maybe they're strangers. They're joining up for the first time. Usually, that role play kind of traditional, just talking and describing your character and that sort of thing. That's one way to do it. It's kind of not typically the way I would want to start, especially with what I'm trying to do. What my game is being transformed from one system to another, so many of the players kind of know each other already. So their characters, I'd rather have them sort of get to know each other in the middle doing something, rather than just kind of sitting around and raising a mug to one another, that sort of thing. Your other option is also kind of traditional or been done before, and that's the whole just stir things up. Just get the action kicked off immediately. The door slams open and a bunch of bandits come storming in, or goblins or something like that, right? People have done that one too. That's a nice way to start a campaign if you just kind of want to get the dice rolling, get your players used to each other and tactics and that sort of thing. Then maybe that's good for certain play groups. For Pathfinder, I don't know, because there is more mechanics in Pathfinder, more rules, so that may not be the optimal scenario, but it might work out because you're trying to get the players used to the rules and how to do stuff. Could work. Then you've got, and this is kind of the idea that I think I'm leaning towards, and this isn't as popular, I guess, or as frequent as some of the other ones, but I think Pathfinder Second Edition allows for this beautifully. And that is starting your players off at level 0. So no classes, right? They are just average Joes and Janes from the street, and they get thrown into something, which gets them to become adventurers. In Pathfinder, what makes this possible is the way they have your hit point pool at character creation is a combination of your ancestry, so whatever, elf, dwarf, you get a certain number of hit points. And then your other hit points come from your class. And when I talked about the ABC of character creation a couple of videos ago, this is where this kicks in as well. So the A, ancestry, you get a set of hit points, and then the C, the class, you get another set of hit points. So at first level, you get the sum of those two sets of hit points plus your constitution modifier. The way a level 0 would work in Pathfinder, and again, it's almost like maybe they set it up to do it this way, but the way I'm thinking about it is your ancestry plus your con is your starting hit points. that's what you got. You are a Duergar. You've got those hit points plus your con. You're not a fighter yet. You're not a wizard. You're nobody. You're the grunt who's out there cleaning the boulders that have collapsed in that tunnel. That's kind of why I sort of was interested in that concept of the collapsed tunnel, and you're out there cleaning it up, trying to get a path through it, because that would fit beautifully with my idea for like a level 0 start, right? And then boom, people are getting attacked, stuff's happening, and the players need to rise to the challenge. And also it helps, I think, learn a new game system, because you don't have to worry about class stuff. You just got your raw ancestry background abilities. You got your basic skills that you've got, your ability modifiers, and that's it. There's no trained in this. There's no weapon proficiencies you got to worry about. There's no class abilities. This is like your first session, level 0, just raw players rolling some dice, using some basic stuff on their character sheets to learn the game, and this would certainly introduce them to the theme, right? Survival. And then another thing is, don't be afraid to take your players and drop them off in a meat grinder. And if seen the movie Predator, you know what I'm talking about, where Dylan and Dutch are arguing in the camp of those whatever those guys were in the jungle, the militant people who had supposedly kidnapped some hostages, and it turns out that that was just a story that Dylan was telling Dutch, I think it was, and you know Dutch is all upset because he's felt tricked or betrayed. So the idea here being, you could easily get your players in with a story to go, oh, you need to go rescue the princess, but in reality, you actually have no intention of there being any princess, and that was just a ruse to suck them in, to get them, because maybe they have something that they don't even know, excuse me, that gets them into trouble, and some mysterious cult is looking for their blood. I don't know. So anyway, you do the whole, over here, and then pop, smack them in the face from the other side. That'll get them kicked off real fast, I think. But there's other things you can do, right? We can check with Kathy again here and see what she thinks. So let's pause that, and we'll run with this question for her. All right, so here is chatty Kathy again. So I say to her, I like the idea of the collapsed tunnel start, and then I just copy pasted what she had suggested about the players being this part of a team that's trying to clear the collapsed tunnel. And then I add in this scenario, can you suggest how to start the first session of this campaign? Like, what's that first session going to be? How's it going to work? So we know where it is, but how do you do it? And I say, hey, my thought is that the players are all level 0 characters with no selected class yet, just their Pathfinder 2nd edition ancestry and background. They're essentially grunts sent by the leaders of a caravan of refugees moving toward what's supposed to be a safe zone away from the chaos of the camps. They get to know each other as they're working to clear a path. Can you expand on that idea and or suggest alternatives? Let's see what she comes up with. Okay, here she goes. She's going to break this down like it's campaign notes. Check this out. All right, so expanding on the idea for the level 0 start and the collapsed tunnel. Prologue. Begin with a prologue narrating the cataclysmic events that have occurred. I mean, she's like mapping this out for you. Vividly describe the chaos bubble's slow and menacing spread, how it gobbles everything it touches into a distorted void. Paint the scenes of desperation, collapsing societies, and the precarious hope that is the convoy of refugees navigating through the treacherous vaults. Emphasize the race against time, as every moment brings the abyss of chaos closer. Initial setting. The characters, ordinary folk of various ancestries and backgrounds, find themselves amidst a caravan of refugees desperate to escape the creeping chaos. They're not seasoned adventurers, but rather people forced into a tight spot by the cruel hands of fate. A blacksmith, an herbalist, a miner, a scribe, regular people without heroic capabilities yet. The collapse. As the caravan traverses through a massive tunnel, once believed to be stable and secure path through the vaults, it collapses due to an unexpected seismic activity, perhaps influenced by the pulsations of the chaos bubble. Boulders crash down, dust fills the air, and panic ensues. The tunnel behind them is blocked, and the chaos bubble is steadily creeping forward, forcing the desperate crowd to push against the collapsed tunnel, fearing the consuming void behind them. Again, Kathy doesn't realize that the chaos bubble is really not that active or alive. So I think rather than that, maybe there's just some creatures of chaos that are emerging from it, and the vibration, the movement of the bubbles signals their release, and these creatures come trucking through this tunnel. That sounds cool. The desperate plea. The caravan leader, an experienced yet wearied scout, perhaps an ex-adventurer, incapable of moving the massive boulders, pleads for volunteers to scout an alternative path through the treacherous, uncharted side tunnels that the caravan would not fit through but might circle around the blockage. Given the desperation, even untrained individuals are accepted. Enter the PCs with their varied reasons for stepping forward: bravery, desperation, or maybe a hidden agenda. Dun dun dun. Side tunnel adventure. The PCs, each with a makeshift torch or glowstone, navigate through the narrow, ominous side tunnels. I like how it's like glowstone. It like knows that's a thing in my campaign world. They navigate through those side tunnels. Here they face their first trials, which should emphasize cooperative problem solving and character development rather than combat. I like that. Puzzle or a trap. There's a simple mechanical trap or trap left by an old inhabitants of the vaults, allowing them to showcase intellectual, perceptive capabilities. A moral dilemma. They encounter a wounded creature, perhaps a sentient being that is neither friend nor foe, stuck under the debris. Do they help? Do they ignore it? Do they end its misery? Subtle threat. There's a distant roar, eerie whispers, glowing eyes in the dark that hints at larger unseen threat, building tension without confronting them in an actual fight. Resource management. Their life source is about to die out. Do they explore a phosphorescent fungi grove, knowing it's the lair of a potentially dangerous creature, or try to navigate in the darkness? Ooh, that's good. The glimpse of the future. Eventually, they find a way around the collapse or perhaps a mechanism to clear it, ensuring the caravan's safe passage. However, the session ends with the foreshadowing, a distant, powerful roar, an ominous message etched into the cavern wall, or perhaps an eerie vision, something that subtly introduces them to the greater threats and epic journey that lies ahead. I mean, she's going way beyond what I asked for. I was like, hey, how do you start it? She's giving me like the start, the middle, the potential end. And then she's pitching some alternatives to my level 0 idea. So she's saying, hey, there's a hidden sanctuary. While scouting, they accidentally discover a hidden sanctuary, perhaps related to an ancient civilization or previous cataclysm, that provides them with not just a way around, but also cryptic insights into the events unfolding and the paths they take. She's alternatives are not alternatives. At least this one's not alternative to level 0. This is like an alternative to just looking for a way around. Okay, so maybe she got a little bit confused. I might have to be a little more obvious. Like, hey, no, I need, instead of them being level 0, could you pose alternatives? Echoes of the past. The side tunnels haunted by the spiritual echoes of a tragedy long past, and the PCs must navigate through these sorrowful and wrathful spirits, possibly gaining unexpected allies or information in the spectral realm. This could actually tie into one of the other plot threads that's going on. So that is interesting. Kind of like that idea, because I can use that to plant a clue about a different plot thread that's currently, you know, humming away. Enemy scouts. They encounter scouts from an enemy faction. Maybe this is where you can introduce some of the agents of order, agents of chaos that are part of this Nexus versus the Chaos Bubble fight. Maybe this is where they run into them. And maybe they offer help, but they have to, these PCs need to help them do whatever it is with Nexus or with the Chaos Bubble. That's an interesting idea, like that. Providing a tense interaction that might resolve through diplomacy, stealth, or very risky combat, showcasing the formidable nature of foes to come. Oh, that also kind of reminds me where they found the moral dilemma, the body here. Maybe that person's part of one of these factions, and they're trying to get him some information. If they could pull this guy out of there, they might, get some extra perks or something. Each option introduces a variety of dynamics, allowing the players to navigate through emotional, moral, and strategic decisions. Love it, thereby organically developing their characters while the initial adventure seeds are sown. See, this is cool right here because this is true. This is how your players can get to know each other based upon how they handle this situation. So rather than you sit around a tavern table sucking down mead and describing what you're wearing to each other, you actually throw the characters into the situation, and you'll learn who the murder hobos are real fast, because they're gonna go slit that dude's throat and pick his pocket while he's laying there dead. But anyway, that's a cool idea. So while the initial adventure seeds are sown, you can start throwing clues down. You can start linking, to other factions, to other plots, and this can blossom into that larger interconnected woven web that I've been talking about. All right, that's some cool stuff. See, Chatty, she knows what she's doing. All right, let's go back to wrap this up then. So you've got yourself a location that you started. You have an idea of how you want to start it. I kind of like what some of those ideas were there, like I was just talking about. And then the last thing that you have to think about is how much agency. How many options are you going to give the players in this first session? So again, if you're in one of those traditional tavern scenarios where describing each other, talking to each other. Some event happens, tavern brawl breaks out, and then maybe use the old, there's the dying guy clutches at your shirt and presses, this bloody parchment into your hand, which has the plot on it, right? Or sorry, the quest on it. But then imagine he's got another piece of paper and sticks that in your pocket, and he's got another piece of paper, shoves that in your pack, and right, like you given all these options, right? Same thing with a quest board. You go to the quest board, there's 2, 3, 5, 10 things on it. Where do you start? How much stuff should you provide the players options for? That's the idea of agency, and it's probably your most potent and maybe important ingredient to your campaign. How much control over the campaign are you giving your players? That's the idea of agency, and it really depends on what you want to do. It depends on your scope of your campaign. If it's just this linear, one-shot thing, you're probably not going to give them a lot of agency. If it's this broad, earth-spanning campaign, then yeah, they probably should have more agency. If it's open world, for sure they should have agency. The time frame is also something to be important. If there's too much agency and they're just wandering around the game world and they don't never get to the actual event, which is going to happen in a week, well, then that was too much agency. You need to reel that in. Also, agency is going to be determined by the connections the PCs have with each other, because if they're all related, as one group together, if you kind of think about the Lord of the Rings as an example here, the Fellowship, there was 9 of those characters. Imagine if the story was trying to get all 9 player characters' stories told at once. I mean, it would be impossible. There'd be so much agency, right? Be so many different options and potentials. So instead, that story is focused around the hobbits, really, right? So, but in your game world, it's not a movie. So, giving your PCs a reason to be together and have some sort of connection is a smart play if you have a larger group of players. Because otherwise, you got to try to satisfy everybody's stories, and that's a big problem. And the last part there is then your comfort as a GM, because are you comfortable trying to juggle all of these plots, or your players being able to do all these different things and just they're open to do whatever they want? If you're experienced, then it's not as big of a deal. But if it's your first time, or you don't have a lot of comfort with the game system, you're trying to learn Pathfinder for the first time, you might want to reel this in so it doesn't get too crazy and out of control, right? That just makes sense. And then kind of wrap this up for this video. For me, in my game world, the vaults, here's where I'm at. Here's where I'm going to go. And I already, reintroduced this conflict in the chatty video there, the chatty section. I'm starting with looking at the conflict in my game, and this is just one of those threads, right? Like I said, I've got 8 potential threads, but this is the pairing of the nexus with the chaos bubble, that intertwining. I have agents of chaos and order, well, for all these, but in that particular section, these 2 groups, which, let's see, Chatty was talking about those. Let me pull up her. Give me a second here. All right, here it is. So, the agents of chaos, these harbingers of the abyss that she was pitching, they have their goals, right? They have their motivations. And then you have what's at stake for them. Same thing with the agents of order, which she is calling the bastion of the celestial equilibrium. They have motivations, they've got stakes that they're concerned about. So those 2 things for my plots that I'm going to be pursuing here, at the start of that particular intertwined thread, I've got that conflict. I've got these two groups, and notice it doesn't involve the PCs. I kind of like that. Your PCs don't need to be directly involved in any of these conflicts. This gives them agency. This gives them a choice. They could side with one group or the other. Does it really matter? No. I know what could potentially happen. Either way could go poorly. Either way could go well. It just depends on what they do. I like that. Options, right? Choices. Those quandaries that we've been talking about. Then also looking at the ideas that Kathy and I were discussing, the victory and defeat conditions for chaos. If the bubble continues to expand until it hits Nexus and mutates it, that's going to create this supercharged arcano intelligence that is going to be assimilate the entire vaults themselves. That's bad, right? I mean, that's going to cause complete chaos. Or if Nexus somehow enters this bubble and takes control of the Nebulon's systems, that'll give it the ability to be supercharged and surge with enough energy to get out of the vaults, enough technology to escape, and it could then take its assimilation process to the surface world and potentially destroy the entire world. Meanwhile, you've got Order and their agents. They're trying to stop the bubble, and so they would love to collapse the bubble back into the ship itself, removing it and it's all its contents, and maybe get Nexus trapped in there too and have it all just sucked out into a different reality or something like that. Of course, that could also suck out a bunch of other innocent people who have gotten stuck in the bubble from no fault of their own. Another thing that the agents of Order are looking at is they're going to try to reprogram Nexus with some sort of anti-chaos. So think like matter, antimatter. So some sort of anti-chaos nanites or whatever that they've trying to cook up, and maybe they need the PC's help with, and then they're gonna try to get that to mix with the chaos bubble, causing some sort of what I'm calling some entropic crystallization. The entire vault just goes 0 point energy, no, all the heat, whatever's sucked out of it, everything just frozen and dead, right? Maybe that's their goal. Which, hey, they stop Nexus, they stop the bubble, but they might kill thousands of people in the process. So that's not necessarily good, is it? So that's what I mean, like having to choose a side. And maybe you look at the chaos side and say, well, that's bad no matter what. But perhaps, escaping this vaults themselves and getting to the surface might be a great escape for all these refugees in the first place. If there's nowhere to go down here and it's too dangerous, wouldn't it be good to get to the surface? So maybe allowing Nexus to get supercharged to get up and out, like drilling its way out or something like that, could be a benefit. So the players might want to help the chaos side. You don't know. And then as far as the venue goes, based upon what I've got going on here, I'm definitely going to have one of the locations is going to be the remains of this drop point despair, which is where Nexus is now layering. Also, this Ivorforth Hall, this Nebulon ship, this chaos bubble, the remains of it, that location, that is going to be a prime place that the PCs are going to have to go in this particular scenario. So looking at those parts of that plot gives me a lot of information as to where and how I can start that particular session. And the idea of the players maybe just being some grunts going out cleaning some collapsed tunnel somewhere, you can see how that ultimately ties into this. If during that adventure there they run into some agents of chaos or order, or they see some clues lying about, or they're attacked by mutated chaos creatures or Nexus nanite assimilated beasts or whatever, who knows, and they're maybe rescued by the agents of order. That definitely gets this ball rolling. Okay, that's going to be the beauty of it. So that's the cool stuff with Kathy that she's allowing you to be able to do. I'm giving her my information, right? I'm taking, like I said, my notes. I take my own thoughts and ideas. You see how I use her in real time. I'll give her information, and then she spits out stuff, and then I take the stuff that she's given me, revise it, adapt it, like you see here with this information. Like this is based upon her initial ideas, and then I've taken that a step further, and then I feed it back into her, and she comes back to me, and we go back and forth like this, and we'll be able to come up with a really cool opening, definitely an opening session, and then of course the bigger picture campaign, that plot. And this is just that one pairing, that one intertwining, and there's going to be at least 3 others, a total of 8 of these plots that are stringing out through the campaign world. All right, I think that's where I would end this one. Lots of information, lots of ways in which ChatGPT is very useful. So hopefully that was good info for you. You learned some stuff, and if you're interested in seeing more, go ahead and like the video, put some comments down in the comments section, all those fun things on YouTube, and hopefully I'll see you later. Take care.